Hmm. It's great. All right. Well, we're going to wait for folks to start filing in. Kind of a last minute live chat and all that kind of thing. Make sure that my mic's on. Let's see here. Bluetooth. Where do I do the mic? Yeah. All right. It's working. All right. Good deal. Hey guys, hey everybody. All right, all right. Just got a couple updates. This is definitely not going to be one of our crazy long ones. And hey, Leonardo, I want to say thank you for that walnut queen rearing frame that you sent me. Walnut is one of my favorite woods, so that's gonna be fun to use this coming season. Thank you, man. Let's see. Hey, thanks, Heath. Some bees and farming. Good to see everybody. A lot of familiar names here. Yeah, nice flag. I know. Well, Ian had the Canadian flag, and it's great for him to be patriotic for a Canadian, but I couldn't let him just have that and me talking to him and not represent. So we're totally taken care of. And I'd like to say thank you to Don Bearden who beat me to the punch. I was going to get one myself, and I checked my PO box and he had sent me one. So thanks, Don from Alabama, and Roll Tide and USA. All right. So, a couple other things I'm going to mention really quick before I get into the meat and potatoes of what I've got to say. This thing's a little low, even for me. Um, yeah, this microphone right here, I might having to duck down a little bit. Maybe I'm just used to getting too close. So, thanks, Hayden Honey, for sending us this honey from Illinois. It is really delicious. It's even got some beeswax up in the top, so we know it's the real stuff. And it's got I mean, just it's really light and a nice, delicate honey. And him and his wife do bees up there, and they've been beekeeping for much longer than I've been alive. So that's really cool. Wanted to read something off. So I've been getting tons of letters recently, of course, for the upcoming conference. And there's been a lot of stuff that I haven't gotten around to. So if you've sent me something, I have got it. Some of the things I just haven't got around to. Thank you, everybody. But here's one I found really fascinating. Kamon, enclosed is the registration that my wife happily wrote for me so I could go spend a weekend talking bees with someone other than her. She said to tell you thank you. Dang. So I thought we were helping beekeepers, but apparently we're helping marriages as well. So this is great. Um, oh my goodness. I thought that was really funny. His wife's probably ready for a break, and Laurel can totally sympathize at times. She's very forgiving, but there are days where she's like, "Can we just not talk about those six-legged things for just 2 hours?" It's hard. All right, so she's never said that. Oh, I got someone from Jamaica, and I'm gonna say one more thing, and then we'll get into it. So I would like to say a very special thank you to Randall Carter, who's also we're going to be seeing him. He's from Alabama, January 8th and 9th, and he donated a very large sum to our test yard, our experimental yard. And I would like to say thank you, Randall Carter, very much, and Carter Family Apiaries. And that is great. It is enough to fund one beehive, and that is excellent and very appreciative. Um, so, anyways, yeah, Alabama all the way. I tell you, we got a lot of Bama people. We got a lot of Tennessee people here too, and people from all over the world. It's mind blowing. Wisconsin, all right. Gatlinburg, yeah. Looking forward to meeting several of you. We've got this planned out pretty well, I think, for the first time, and I'm excited to say that Kent Williams is going to be one of our speakers. He's a Kentucky beekeeper that also goes down to southern Mississippi. He knows a lot about this region. Ken is a very nice guy. He's really good to talk to and ask questions of. And that's one thing I really wanted with all of our speakers is to be able to get people who are very personable, who are patient. Because I remember being a brand new beekeeper, you get some guys that are great. I mean, you ask them 5 questions and they'll answer you. And then you have some people by the third question, they'll shut you down. And this conference is designed for getting those questions out there and getting them answered. And these fellas are the ones that are going to be able to do it. Also, we're going to have Strong's microbials that are going to be there as well. I'm setting up. There's going to be some other vendors. Some of them I cannot say because it's a new product that'll be hitting the market in 2021. Also, Kelly Bees is going to be there again. They are going to be hauling all kinds of stuff down, and they'll bring stuff for you. Let's see. Callie, hey from Kentucky. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Mexico. All right. I don't think I've ever seen that one before. So, Marco, Antonio, down there in Mexico. Good to have you on. Okay, so Justin Mitchell says, how can I send you some honey? You can send it always to our P.O. Box at P.O. Box 332, Gainsboro, Tennessee, 38562. And that has worked really good so far. Yeah, it should be in the description on our videos. That's 332 Gainsboro, Tennessee. Let's see here. There was a question I had on the comment from yesterday's video on that Hive Dome. And man, I've gotten some interesting feedback on that product. And when I do videos like this, I'm not saying, hey, Eddie or Lee or Jason or whoever, you need to buy one of these. I do these videos so you can see what they look like in action. And sometimes I weigh an opinion in there. A lot of products like this, they're not necessarily bad, but there's not necessarily cost effective either. Do you see me putting 300 of these out there on my beehives? No, you don't. They're like 18.95. And I think it's really neat. Kelly's gave it to me to tinker around with. I think it makes a lot of sense as far as circulating the air throughout the hive during wintertime, the thermodynamics. But $19 times 300 is not a figure that I like unless that's honey money coming this away. So we've survived 17 seasons without them. It's still a neat observation tool. I'm anxious to see what the oxalic acid vapor looks like on film in that thing, and it'll be a neat, fun tool. I'm not saying you shouldn't get one, but don't ever think that I'm trying to pressure you into these odd things. If you're wondering what I think about something, like really, really think about something, and am I using it for my business? Because that should tell you how important it is to me. And not that I have everything figured out either, but um, if I really liked them, I'd have 300 of those things. Sunset Heritage Farms. Well, everybody, we're going to have a conference in 2022, and I'm sure it'll be much better and much grander. This one's going to be good. There are a lot of limitations right now on what we can and cannot do. So it won't be as grand as it's going to be in 2022, but this will be a good trial run. It's going to still be great. And we are going to have more time. And also, the Canadian border should be open. We get Ian Stepler down here. He's already agreed to do that. We're already working on getting a date. And I might have that date pretty soon. So I might be announcing 2022's conference here in the next couple of weeks. As soon as we get that nailed down, we will let you know, and we'll start talking about speakers for that as well. We're going to try to have Maxent Extractors out as a vendor as well for this conference, and just try to have a good bunch of different things, especially American products, which Maxent has got some good American extractors. Hey, Cayman. Oh, this is a good question and kind of a hard one. Hey, Cayman, to what extent do you agree with bees know best? Man, let's step on some toes today with this one. I'm feeling like stomping. I got some new shoes. Seriously, I got some new shoes today. What are you giggling over there for? What? It's a good thing you're too shy to talk to these people. Be embarrassing. All right. Anyway, so bees do know a lot. As far as They're programmed very well. But part of what makes the bees good at what that they do in survival is eliminating all the bad stuff. And sometimes that elimination comes from poor genetics, being weeded out, but sometimes good bees die. You can have a great hive that'll land in a poor cavity. Maybe there's not a good cavity around. So let's say a beekeeper, lets her bees swarm and there's no big tree cavities around or anything like that. And they go into too small of a tree cavity in early spring. They get in there and they build up too big and then they're going to swarm again because they run out of space. That's not ideal. It'd be better if they stayed together and kept their resources together. So there's a lot of variables there. Also, bees are not really good at some of these pests that come in. They also rob each other. That spreads diseases around. Bees do some things. They sometimes they don't requeen themselves properly. You can even try to reintroduce a queen, a great queen that was laying perfectly in another hive, and that hive is hopelessly queenless. It can't do anything about it. And you try to requeen it, and they'll kill that queen. So I would say bees really don't know really anything, but they are programmed to respond in certain ways, which can be positive or negative. And I think they have some negative attributes that can actually be bad for them. So, as beekeepers, I think we need to understand that the bees are very good at a lot of things, but some things they are very poor at. And we need to find out what those are so we can kind of address that. It's kind of what husbands and wives are supposed to do, especially with Laurel, with me, is these are your strengths, Cayman, and these are your weaknesses, and the list gets longer by the year. 10 years of marriage, and paperwork's too deep at this point on all the list. Anyways, that's just my opinion on it. I think beekeepers and bees can be a very nice coexistence. All right, so to be or not to be, thank you. Would you consider selling online access to the conference? And I have considered it. I don't know hardly anything about technology. You would think I would have in a YouTube channel. Laurel does all the tech stuff. I really just stay out of the way, and we don't have a lot of extra time. We actually have somebody who's we hired to help us plan this because otherwise it just would have not have happened. Laurel is still doing a ton of this kind of work, and I've got dozens of emails to get out tonight. Or oh, I said me. Laurel does. And speaking of which, have you posted that on Facebook? No, that's not okay. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff to go on. I would love to have it live. I'm not sure if we will. Now we will be recording it, um, but I don't know exactly if we're going to be able to make a live version. Yeah. Okay. Well, and if anybody is sending a check for the conference, just be patient. It's going to take probably a day or two to get your email out. Yeah, we got a ton of them today. I'll be checking my PO box about every 2 or 3 days. So if you send it in, we will get back with you as soon as we possibly can. All right. Smyrna, Tennessee, all that stuff. I know I missed a good question up here. Yeah, yeah. Ian's gonna if he comes in here, I think he's gonna look at my American flag. Mine's I think a little bit bigger than his. So I think that's I don't even need to say anything else. All right. Uh, oh, one of the things I was gonna say earlier, and I interrupted myself, and I apologize because I'm really bad about doing that. Is I got a question on one of our comments yesterday's video about pollen patties being junk food for bees and what my opinion was on that. And I thought that would make a good conversation for us today. And I don't know if Stan is on here. He was the one that asked. So this is the way I look at it. There is no substitute for diverse or good quality pollen. A lot of times, diversity is better. There are a few pollens out there that are pretty good and nutritious by themselves, but most pollens are better when there's variety. So we need to realize first that not all pollens are perfect, and pollen's quality can be impacted if it's a very poor season and there's not a whole lot of rainfall and the goldenrod or whatever. This typically happens in the fall for us. Is the weather's just not very good, and the whatever it is impacted the plants. If the plants aren't healthy or if they're stressed, then the pollen quality is going to be less than ideal. So that affects the protein content. It's going to affect the mineral content. In spring, that's usually why it's better for us, is because it's you have more plants producing pollen, and they're typically a lot of your big producers are oaks and hickories, maples, these trees that can delve 30, 40, 70 feet into the subsoil where a lot of the trace minerals are, and bring that up and give it to the bees and pollen. It's truly fantastic. So, but not all pollens are created equal. Some pollens by themselves are worthless, and some of them don't have a complete amino acid profile. So, that being said, typically pollen is much better than pollen substitute. Substitute is the incorrect term, in my opinion. It should be supplement because it really does not substitute anything. Now, there are some products out there like global patties, which I have every intention of trying them out this year. I've never used them. I've heard some good things from some professional beekeepers. They have irradiated pollen in them. So you do have some pollen in there. Now, how nutritional that is, I'm not sure. It's irradiated because pollen and honey that come from foreign apiaries, if it's not irradiated or something like that, then you could be introducing viruses or foul brood or just all kinds of different things into your hives. So this irradiated pollen supposedly still has a lot of mineral content and makes the global patties better. There still is corn and soy and some, it depends on where you get it from. Some of them don't use soy, some of them do use soy. I think Global Patties has a couple different recipes. And I know that Ultra Bee, um, if you buy in bulk, you can get a non-GMO Ultra Bee. Now, I'm not sure if they still have that because a lot of these things come and go with demand. But so there, there is a lot of products like that. And people are like, well, isn't that just junk food? Because you're putting in a ton of sweetener, cane syrup, you're putting in corn, you're putting in soy. Isn't that just junk food for bees? How good can that be? Well, they're also putting in a lot of other things. They're putting in zinc. They're putting in trace minerals, just tons and tons of them, iron. I mean, in balanced amounts, trying to mimic it as much as possible, it being pollen. And so it's really not junk food. I would consider it more like a bodybuilding formula. And I think that it can be helpful at times, but it's limited. I would say its best use pollen substitute would be in spring when you are trying to get those bees built up for your honey flow, and you're just trying to smooth the gaps out. You have the maple flow start here in early February, and hopefully your bees can get out and work it a bunch, and then you get those patties in there. So hopefully you don't have this issue, but there's going to be some periods, especially that time of the year, where the bees just can't fly, and just kind of helps smooth the gaps. And on your big champs, usually you don't see quite as big of a difference as the ones that are pretty good hives, but they don't have as much resource. They don't have as much protein in the hives. And it's going to vary from year to year. If you had a great fall like we did this year with a lot of pollen, you probably won't see as big of an advantage of using it as if you had a really poor fall flow and then you're feeding that coming out of winter. So I see it as something that, especially as a business, is a very and a very important tool is smooth those gaps, keep those bees going forward when we really need them to. Junk food, I would say it's not junk food, but to say that it is pollen is not the case. I'm looking forward to trying global patties out this coming year. Oh yeah. I need a hat. Oh, he's got stapler on his head? What does that say? Oh, I voted stapler. Goodness gracious, talk about chaos. That's hilarious. I wonder who made that hat. That's Richard Noel, maybe he made that. All right, got yeah. And see, that's what I've been using. The last time I bought Ultra B, Well, the last several times I've purchased I've used pollen substitute. It's been Ultra Bee. I bought a 1,500 pound sack last time, one of those big sacks. You can get a pretty good deal. But yeah, I got a flag. It's awesome, and the Ultra Bee has done really good for me. But I'm always looking to up my game nutritionally for my bees. Number one, I want the fastest consumption possible, and I've talked to some guys who have much bigger operations than I do, and they say that global patties are consumed faster than Ultra Bee. Obviously, we have small hive beetles here in Tennessee. So if we can get something that they'll consume the same poundage a day faster, that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And plus, it has pollen in it. I've heard that the bees build up better. I don't know. That's why I'm going to try it. Cayman, do you see yourself going to 8 frame boxes to prevent a bad back? Maybe when you are 60, do you see disadvantages to 8 frame boxes? Well, Russell, I don't see myself doing that. But I am going to medium supers. That's kind of the trade-off that we have made. I think we're not fully grown to where we want to be. I'd like to see myself right now around 400 production colonies. So we're going to grow about 25% larger over time. And as the kids get bigger, we might go significantly more than that. We'll see. But I don't see myself going to eights because I feel like one, I have all this 10 frame equipment. It's a lot of it. So I'd have to change a lot of things. And also, I think there's a way to work around that. If I'm wanting to eliminate weight in that 10 frame box, I can run 8 frames in there and then get a 1.5 gallon frame feeder. And so I can have that on the side and just keep it in there year round. And so still have that 8 frame kind of system. Yes, the boxes are a little bit wider, but it wouldn't be too much heavier than an 8 frame. um, there's nothing wrong really with an 8 frame. Bees will work it just fine. Some commercial operations actually use 8 frames. Um, it's just a matter of personal preference, but 10 frames to me are just more uniform. It's easier to sell them. That's mainly my issues of I'm hoping at some point to be able to actually sell singles in the future. So it's going to be 10 times easier to sell off 10 framers than eights. So I don't see myself changing, but there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to go eights, came on back and there's a feed on using what I need. This feed. Let's see. Been watching lots of videos. Have been learning a lot from Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey James, thanks so much. Got a fellow Tennessean. I didn't watch the Tennessee game. Did anybody see if the Vols won today? Or did they even play today? I can't remember. I didn't even watch the Alabama game. That's how busy I have been with bees. I have not hardly watched any football this year. I definitely am not watching NFL for many reasons. But college football, I usually love to watch Alabama. I haven't watched hardly a game. All this bee stuff. See, yeah, the mediums. Laurel, she's really strong, and I consider myself fairly strong as well. I can handle deep boxes. It's no problem. But when you start talking about handling hundreds of them and picking them up, especially right now since we don't have a lift, it really adds up. It's a repetition that catches up with you. And I'm only 32 right now. Let's see. Yeah, I really like that Hayden honey. It's really good. The kids tried it too. We all did, and everybody liked it. Tennessee 10, Auburn 10 halftime. Okay, so they're playing right now. Well, I'm definitely pulling for Tennessee in that game. When you feed sugar syrup, do you always mix it with essential oils? Thanks. Hey, Glenn, I really don't hardly ever use essential oils anymore. We just, I don't really need to. I just feed the regular stuff. The only thing I know for sure essential oils does right now at this point is discourage fermentation. So that's an advantage, but it does encourage robbing. So I feel like that's not a fair trade-off. I'd rather just get it on, get it quick. Some people are talking about it being useful as far as maybe eliminating some viruses and mites. I haven't seen enough good data to be sure about that. It's kind of like the Strong's microbial product that we're going to have, the vendor that's going to be there. they're going to be talking about healthy gut bacteria for bees. Now, if this stuff is actually getting into the bees and it is the same thing that the bees already have in there and it's just helping encourage more of that, I can see this product being very helpful. But how do I know that it does that? And this is where it becomes really difficult to know if it's you're making a good purchase or not because it's really split down the middle. I mean, I have heard of literal beekeeping operations that have over 15,000 hives using this product and saying they like it. I've also heard of beekeepers that have, 8 to 10,000 hives and say it's a waste of money. Who to trust? And I don't have any personal experience. And I think it could be very difficult, especially if you live in an area that has a lot of good pollens, which already have natural probiotics in them. It's going to be hard to ascertain the effectiveness of this product. So I'm anxious to learn more about it myself. One of the reasons why I asked strong microbials to come out there. But with the essential oils, I feel like we're kind of in the same boat where a lot of people are like, yes, 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 use this. And there's some YouTubers like, just throw this in there and a dash of this and throw a tongue of, newt and wing of bat and a little bit of that. And that it's going to kill your mites at the same time and all those things. Hey, Stan, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for supporting our channel. Hope you guys are doing well down there, and I hope everything works out. We can see you and meet you for the first time in January. Looking forward to that. If you got any questions, hit me. Yeah, Laurel just made a hit move over there. She's like, bam. Don't don't be hitting me on camera. Laurel says the next time someone says I have a question, she's gonna smack me now because I said go ahead and hit me with one. All right, all right. There's a comedian in every crowd. Usually it's me, but not today. Yeah, Ricky says get a horizontal hive, no lifting. That I really need to do one on a horizontal hive. I'm so sorry I didn't get that done this year. Just having to focus on fewer things and do them well. What if you used a flat sheet of clear plastic panel? I really don't know about that. I really don't know everything about this one. I will tell you all about the dome that right now in the early mornings, you're seeing some condensation build up every morning, just a thin little layer. And as soon as the bees become active right now, they're going up there and they're lapping up that water off of that plastic. And that's pretty normal for bees to do in the wintertime is to use condensation. Not all of it if you're producing a lot, but they'll use some of it for in the hive needs. They definitely do need water during the winter. So I'm anxious to see what they look like in January on those cold days and see if the condensation is dripping away from the hive, the cluster is healthy looking. We'll just have to see. Time will tell. Again, it's like $19, so you're not going to watch me do videos on installing these on every hive. All right, so we got someone who's 14, started beekeeping 2 years ago, found your videos recently. They've been so helpful. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. You you are about the age I was when I first started thinking about getting into bees, and I'm sure you are going to do much better than I did. Much better at that age. I tell you, I got into it and I really didn't think there was hardly any work involved. And that was the first mistake that I made. Just like everything else in life, you kind of get what you put into it. And sometimes you don't even get that. But um, I think bees are very rewarding when knowledge and putting in the due diligence into the hive that's required. Now, sometimes you don't have to do hardly anything and you can get a pretty decent bit out, but that's typically with strong swarms at the right time of the year. All right. So, John Hatchie said, are you going to give a rundown on the conference after it's over? So, as far as recording stuff, we are going to do some of that kind of thing. Um, I don't know to what extent we're going to be able to work on right now. We've got so much going on. I haven't hardly been able to focus any at all at seeing if we could do a live stream or anything like that. I haven't even called and seen what the internet capabilities of this place are. I know they have it. Likely it's fiber. Thankfully, we have a lot of that in the state of Tennessee. I'll try to look into that, but honestly, I'll need to get somebody else probably to do that, or it just won't happen. What's the best honey extractor on the market? Ooh, well, what's your budget? Um, Seriously though, if you're looking at something that's kind of smaller, I would say Maxent. There, every time that I've seen one, I've never used one, so this is just based off of what I've seen over the years. I like my Dadant 20 frame extractor. It's good. I think for the money, is a good extractor, and I'm still using it. I'll eventually be moving away from it just because I want something with more capacity, but it's been a good extractor for me. But Maxent stuff is made really well. I think it's going to hold its value very well compared to some extractors out there. It's going to be around a long time. They've always just been made very heavy duty, made in the USA. I like Maxon Extractors. It's a good small scale beekeeping supply company here in the US. However, there are other options out there. The Dadant is also made in the US and it is good as well. Um, I really don't like anything that's made in China, um, especially when it comes to steel products for like smokers and extractors and something like that. Yeah, Ian Stepler is feeding bees with snow outside. It's an age-old question. And see, there's a lot of people that think that you can't be feeding at some of these cold temperatures. Many professional beekeepers do. And it's just kind of part of the learning curve. But when you hang around hobby groups, I'm just being really frank here because I used to hang around them, and it's all about who you're listening to. Are you listening to people who are very successful? Do they say that they're successful or can they prove it? And how do you define success? I mean, are you successful with 4 hives and you're the local club guru, or are you running a business where a successful sideline and your honey is in stores all over all over town every year? So, just be careful where you get your information. When I first got into beekeeping, I didn't think that you could feed below 50 degrees. It's better to do it before it gets that cold, but you totally can do it. Oh, thank you. Mm-mm-mm. I wouldn't mind having a licensed dealer at the conference. They're not American made, but I've heard some good things about them. The only negative thing I've heard about Lyson or Leeson, I don't know how everybody pronounces it, but I say Lyson, is that I've heard some people say that they've been changing some of the parts in their extractor, which is kind of frustrating. I tell you, my favorite extraction equipment that I've been around is anything made by Cowan. They're very expensive, but they're worth every penny. My Silver Queen Uncapper is made by Cowan. There's a lot of extraction equipment that is used by commercial and professional beekeepings. It's made by Cowan. Nice American long company that's been around, and they make you can buy something of theirs from well before I was born, and they are making parts to this day that still are compatible and useful. They do make upgrades, but they still make it to where the old ones can be fixed, and they have parts where you can fix them. Um, you can find some pretty reasonable Silver Queen old chain uncappers, and with a little bit of work, and let me tell you, you can call Cowan. It doesn't matter if you got 50 hives or 5,000. They will talk to you and help you get your machine up and running, or you can even send it to them and they will repair it for you. I can't say enough good things about Cowan beekeeping. They are really good, and hopefully, our conference one day will be big enough. Maybe we can get some of their stuff out there, but it'll have to be pretty big. Let's see. Yeah, I've never heard in 17 years. Now, watch it be today. Excuse me. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about their Maxent extractors or equipment. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but after 17 years of only hearing positive things about Maxent, that gives me a lot of confidence about Maxent equipment. Yeah, Jason, Sneeden, November. I was feeding a hive just the other day, and now 99% of our hives were well fed before November even started. So I haven't hardly been feeding all, but there's always a couple little ones that are a little bit lighter, do experiments, that kind of stuff. And it's been a mild November. Just feed it thick. And you know, it's I'm using cane sugar syrup. Let's see. Ah, Canada, got another Canadian person on here. Good to see you, Robin. All right. Yeah, I reached out to Maxent the other day. I haven't got an email back from them yet. I'm going to try to get a hold of one of their dealers. I know that it's getting closer to Thanksgiving, and also that everyone's busy and possibly short staffed right now. So I'm hoping I hear back from Maxent and they can maybe get a couple extractors out there for us. And even if we don't get them this year, I'm trying to set everything up for 2020 too, because hopefully all of this stuff will be behind us at that point, and we're going to have quite the shindig. Well, it's just not everything made in the USA is good necessarily, but if you can find those companies that are passionate about what they do, and that's what they do at Cowan. That's the vibe that I've gotten from Maxent. And they focus on just a few things. I mean, Cowan and Maxent, they just do extraction equipment, and they do it and they do it well. Instead of I like some of the stuff at Man Lake and Kelly's, I do, but they are a prime example of jack of all trades and masters of none. I'm sure they'd love me for that, but they're too busy fooling with chickens and obscure little things than to be able to focus on the quality control they need in the you know, important parts of the business, like their boxes and their extractors. I think their extractors are all right. From what I've been able to see, I've actually used one, but why would I buy one necessarily from them if I can go to Maxon or Cowan and get one where when I call them up, they're not going to talk to me about chickens. They're going to talk to me about, oh, yeah, you're talking to the guy that actually knows the guy because they're in the same building that's welding on these things. You can get some results. What do you think about putting some burlap sap between the inner cover and lid to absorb moisture during the winter? Thoughts? Yeah, I know some people that use it as an inner cover. As far as moisture absorption, I think it would absorb some moisture. Burlap's kind of I don't know how good it is at absorbing moisture. I think it would be more of a separator than anything. I don't know what the wicking properties of burlap necessarily are. Very limited experience with it, and when I've usually burned it in my smoker, and that's about it. I don't I've never used anything in my hive as a wicking agent for condensation. I never have. So I really can't say anything about these quilt boards and these different ways of wicking moisture because I have never attempted to do so. And the I thought about trying it a couple years ago, but I'm seeing guys like Bob Benny and other professional beekeepers who basically just have a lid on their hives, and I think just focusing on getting big, healthy clusters in there and with plenty of food is the most important attribute in areas like mine. Now, when you're further up north, and I'm not saying insulation is not good, I am throwing some insulation on hives again this year, but what's the cost and then the time? So I'm still figuring some of those things out. And I think what might not make a lot of sense for a business can still make sense for a hobby or a small business. So some people really love insulation. And again, that's why we're putting in this test yard. A lot of positive things going towards that. So I'm anxious to see how that turns out with the insulation. Oh, Ian's on. So what's Caracote? I've heard that term before. MAGA plus Canada. I'm making beekeeping great again, Ian, don't you know? You can't say that. I think you tried to say that the other day, but you're too Canadian for that kind of stuff. I'm full of it today. I thought I was full of it every day. I need to step up my game. Apparently, after 10 years of marriage, I'm not as full of it as I was when we first got married. I've got to work harder. What do you use to reduce the entrance of your hives during the winter? There are so many options and opinions. I have no set plans. Now, if the colony is pretty small, the entrance is reduced really small. Let's say if it's like a 3 to 5 frame cluster, some young splits. I don't want really more than an inch of entrance on that colony. So we're looking something about the size of a quarter for a colony like that. And that's mainly due to robbing late in the year because bees can get robbed out in October and even early November here. But it's not really about cold weather or anything like that. And then colonies that are a good strong single, I'm going to have them reduce, probably down to 2 inches. But sometimes I don't get around to it. There's probably half of my hives right now are either fully open or have it reduced down to 6 inches, and we're pretty mild here. I don't really get too worried about it. Hey, thanks, Ian. Don Bearden just he up and sent me this flag, and he just felt we just felt too much Canadian pressure up there, and we felt it was good, but we had to make sure that we were holding our own down here in the U.S. But no, I love how patriotic you are about Canada. Um, However, you post a lot more on Facebook than I do. I thought I was posting a lot until I started following you, and then I'm like, holy smokes, Ian, he must actually have Carrie doing all the work up there for him because he's too busy posting on Facebook to get any of it done himself. Could be wrong. So I told you I was full of it. Let's see here. Buckwheat pillows. Hey, that's a new one. Yeah, an inch of blue foam under the lid. Yeah. Friend lost 4 colonies over the last 2 weeks from robbing. And my question is, why are they weak? Were they made late splits or do they just get weak over the season? And if they did, then either that's a nutritional problem, a poor queen problem, or very likely a mite problems. And sometimes it's a combination of those three, which those are the three keys that we talk about is great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition. All right, so one shoe is saying from that Jim from Vino Farms uses burlap as a wicking agent on all of his hives. All right, well, I have never seen that before. Maybe that works pretty good for him. We get a lot of moisture here, a ton of it. So, and then the bees produce condensation quite a bit too. We're very humid. So, I would like to see more research on this kind of thing. So, if anyone comes across anything monumental, send it at Tennessee'sBees@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stuff to read. Will you talk about drone rain for the purpose of raising queens, specifically the need to place drone hives a half a mile away? Man, there's a lot of opinions on this as well. And we don't fully understand everything there is to DCAs, which is drone congregation areas, and all the dynamics that are involved with that. So some people, have different opinions on this. My thoughts are queens are arguably, they're the crux. I mean, they're the very most important part of the hive. You can have everything else, a clean hive, hardly any mites, good nutrition, but if your queen stinks, you're in trouble. And good queens can really help a colony out. So when it comes to raising them, we want the best. So if we don't understand fully what's going on, then we need to err on the side of caution, in my opinion. We need to make sure that there are ample amount of drones in the area. So, I've got a bee yard a couple miles over that way. I've got a friend about 3/4 of a mile, half a mile from me, to the west of me. And we do our best to go all around and ensure that we have drones around our queens. And I've got another bee yard more towards the, oh goodness, it's southeast. I gotta get, I'll have to, maybe I can do a video on that at some point and talk about that this coming spring would be a great that would be a great topic. But basically, my goal is to ensure that no matter where that queen goes, that she's going to run into some drones. And there's also some wild bees out there too, but we don't want her mingling around with a bunch of crazy guys that are going to give us a lot of traits that we don't want, especially hot genetics. So drones are very important. Now, Bob Benny at this conference is going to be talking a lot about feeding and queen rearing, something that nutrition and queens are very important. We'll be talking about mites as well. I'll be releasing that list of topics, and Ian has agreed to talk at least once. Kind of a it's a virtual thing, unfortunately, because it's just things are shut down. But unless something crazy happens, we'll see him in 2022, and we really look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of shenanigans, and all that kind of stuff. So Merry Christmas 2.0 says, when will you start doing splits? So I have done splits as early as the first week of March, but that's not recommended here in Northern Tennessee. The end of March is much better. And you can start doing it at that period. You're really pushing the season. So the splits need to have plenty of bee coverage to keep that brood warm. And then depend if the weather, if it's a mild spring, then they can be very successful. 80 to 90% takes on those queens coming back from mating. If you are bringing in queens, then it will work even better as far as not having to worry about the mating part of it. But the weather, especially that time of the year, you could have literally in early April, we can get days that are pushing 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or we can get days that don't get out of the low 40s. And the nights are dropping down and we're getting 27, 25 degrees. So we're going to be more likely again this year, just waiting till the very end of March. I don't like pushing the season. I hate ruining a good batch of queens because I wouldn't wait a week or two. Yeah, hey Don. All right, he's on here. How do you feel about Better Comb? Well, Melissa, there's several of my friends, Frederick Dunn and Dan of Dansky's Bees, that have done videos on that. I haven't used it myself, but they both highly recommend that it is wired, because without wiring it in, it will collapse on itself in hot summer days, which is an absolute disaster from what I hear. So definitely, if you use it, wire it in. The bees do seem to use it. So I see this as something that could be a temporary fix for beekeepers who are trying to keep their bees in space. Let's say that you get that first deep drawn, or you have a just one deep box for your bees of drawn comb, and you're coming in this year and they're looking really good. Well, the thing of it is, they need space. They need space for that queen to lay, especially if the nectar flow hits hard and they plug that nest. They're going to want to swarm. So you can get a box of this stuff, and don't use it for honey. Use it for brood, because it's not really beeswax. I don't care if on the molecular scale they say that it's pretty much the same thing. You can use it for brood, help keep that queen in space, and it can kind of help you until they get drawing that real comb. So I think it can be used that way. Is it cost effective? I'm not 100% sure about that, but can it be helpful? And then when you weigh the cost of losing a swarm of bees and potentially a honey crop, it might make a lot of sense to you. So there's other options out there as well, and we actually have Permacomb sending out some plastic combs, food grade. We're going to try them out this year. I wanted to try them for well over a decade. We're obviously not going to be switching our business to plastic combs, but it could be, again, something that you could buy, one for your hive per hive if you don't have any supers, and it can give your bees that time and space to put that nectar until they start drawing your foundations out. And then once you get to a certain place, and you can recycle that 100% recyclable plastic comb. So I'm just giving people options. I'm exploring the world of beekeeping. Doesn't mean necessarily it makes sense for me. So yeah, some people really like it. Some people think it's great. It sounds like beekeeping in a nutshell right there. See. All right. This girl what might. Did I miss some? Miss somebody up here. Tim Holmbeck. What do you think about inverted sugar? So, Ian, do you want to weigh on this a little bit? Because, where I live, you can get away with a lot of feeding stuff that you can't up in the cold regions of the world. But as far as, we talking about inverted granulated sugar, or are we talking like inverted syrup? And I'll keep an eye out for your question there. Now, what I'm using is inverted syrup. It's not fully inverted, but basically what I have right now is sucrose, which is just like cane sugar that you go to the store, and the manufacturer of it partially inverts it. It's this process that's based very similar off what the bees do to nectar. A lot of nectar is sucrose, and the bees take it in and then they invert it, and it makes it to where it can hold more sugars into it. Um, and obviously, you can get a product like honey, which only is 18% or roughly around there moisture content. You can't do that just sticking, cane sugar and water and trying to thicken that up. It won't work without inversion. See you, John. Let's see. And so what they did with mine, they inverted it partially, and it is 51% sucrose still, if I remember correctly, and 49% a mixture of fructose and glucose, which is what the bees do to nectar. Is they pretty much invert it primarily into fructose and glucose. Just depending on the source and a few other things, will depend on the ratios there, which is why honey varies so much across the world. All right. So that's what I know about inverted syrup. And now I know up in cold regions there can be more of an issue. So Ian says I feed partially inverted sucrose to get that 67% solids. And that comes the way that is, Ian. You don't dilute that down. You just feed it thick and heavy, if I remember correctly. But I really like how it makes wonderful patties, in my opinion. You can take Ultra B, um, pollen substitute, or Mega B, or anything like that, and you can mix syrup. It's a lot easier to mix with the syrup and get a patty that stays moist. Then on top of that, if you're wanting to dilute it, it is much easier to keep it thick. Like you can take basically 4 gallons of that syrup and then just add a half gallon of warm water and just thin it out a little bit. And it's just really easy to mix in comparison to straight sucrose, like a bag of granulated sugar, because it's just in a different form. Is my screen blurry to you all? I had some. Laura was looking at it on the phone, and she says I look kind of grainy. I am kind of looking grainy on this end too, so I don't know what's going on. It didn't help much. Oh well. So let's see here. But Tim, thanks so much for the donation to our experimental yard. And if you have any more questions to follow up on inverted sugar, um, get you know, hit me with a question. Yep, Ian says a semi load straight from the sugar plant. All right, all right. So, and that's keeping it pretty simple there. And I think that's a lesson that I would stress kind of to a lot of new beekeepers and beekeepers who have been around a while is sometimes just don't overcomplicate things. I think it's human nature to try to complicate things. And sometimes we need to learn more, never stop learning. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes we try to reinvent the wheel when it's not needed. Cane sugar and sucrose has been used for a long time and with high levels of success. And so, if you can innovate something, that's great. But if you've already reached the best that is possible, then it's going to be hard to fix that. And I think sometimes people just throw a dash of this and a dash of that just to have their own version of it. There's a lot of not a lot of science behind any of it. Goodness, hey, where's that water, Laurel? All right. So I saw another thing about sugar. Do you ever feed pollen sub this time of the year, Carico? So no. It's November the 21st, I think it is, and I don't feed pollen sub here. The bees don't want to really brood up hard this time of the year, and I feel like there's no profit to it. Yes, can I get them to brood a little bit more? Possibly, especially with this mild weather. But whenever I do that, there are winter bees that are having to convert to nurse bees in order to feed that additional bit of larvae. And they're just not prone to raise a lot right now. It would take so much inputs just to get a little bit of brood. And if I save that money and do the same inputs on the flip side of the winter solstice in late January, 1st of February, they want to brood up. They want to build up as they see that increasing day length. And so it makes a lot more business sense. And I don't feed this time of the year pollen sub, whether it's open dry feed or pollen patties. Ooh. Yeah, well, we're gonna have to invest in something better in the future. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, I saw something good. Do you primarily feed per hive? Wondered if you open feed at this time of the year to be helpful with robbing. Well, I primarily feed per hive, and this is because usually the toughest and the biggest colonies that I have, and if you have a really uniform yard where all your bees are very similar in strength, open feeding, as long as you're not affecting anybody else, can work, and it still does otherwise, but the problem is if you've got some 5 frame nukes in that yard and then you have some 12 frame clusters in there or bigger, some really powerful colonies, the lion's share is totally going to those colonies. And usually those are the ones that need it the least because they socked away stuff from the fall flow since we lead the fall flow honey. So I typically take it on a per colony basis, and because there's some that'll come out of fall with hardly any need for feed or no need in a good year, and then there's going to be some that are going to need 4 or 5 gallons, especially the young summer splits. The August made splits. So I mainly take it on a per colony basis, and I use my feeding system, which I really like because it's fast. Laurel and I can zip through a yard of 50 colonies with setup and everything easily under half an hour, no problem. And we usually do inspections in the fall, check for queens and certain things like that. And so if we see any that are having that are low while we're looking for queen issues or anything like that. If they're really low on feed, we'll mark them with a lumber crayon so we know this colony needs it heavy, and we'll even mark them if they don't need a thing because there's no need to open that hive and attempt to feed if they're done. So it just really depends. All right. Let's see. Hey, Mickey Holness, thank you so much for donating to our experimental yard and for coming on and all that kind of stuff. All right, we got Don Summers on here, and all those people from over on the sister state over there in Missouri. I tell you, there's going to be so many of you. I know your names, and I'm going to be able to meet several of you in January. It's going to be a really fun experience. It's also going to be really hard on me to remember all the names. I talked to Bob Benny today, and he's like, "I'm getting nervous," and I'm like, "What are you getting nervous about?" And I was thinking it was something else. So if Bob Benny's getting nervous, I'm like, oh boy, what's he nervous about?" And I was getting nervous, and he's like, I'm getting a bunch of people, Cayman, that are messaging me and commenting on my YouTube, saying that they're looking forward to meeting me, and I don't know who these people are." So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Bob's a great guy, and he's a really good beekeeper. Very personable. He's gonna be perfect, and we've already got him lined up for 2022 as well. He's the type of guy that one conference isn't gonna be enough. He's got so much information to share. How do you store your honey so it doesn't crystallize? How's that video coming of decrystallizing buckets of honey? Thank you for bringing that up, Jim S. I actually was looking at the test. One of the things I pretty much knew that it was going to work, but it's one thing to know it's going to work and to actually do it. And so I wanted to make sure before I told you guys how the system works, I wanted to test it thoroughly. And I'm really pleased to report that we should have a video up within the week on that subject. And I think it's extremely cost effective for everybody. Whether you have 100 hives and you're using buckets or less, it's going to cost about $30 at the most. And if you have some of these things available to you, maybe as little as $20, which I think for the ability to decrystallize 3 buckets at a time, I think that's fantastic. I think this thing can last a long period of time. So I'm not going to tell you all what it is yet, but I will be soon. And I think it'll be worth your time. Yeah, Ian. Bob's really nice. He's so nice. He's more Canadian than you are, Ian. So Linda Wolf asked, "What conference?" Um, we have a conference that's going to be in January, this coming year, 2021, 8th and 9th. It's going to be in Lebanon, Tennessee, and it's going to have Bob Benny, me, Kent Williams, and Ian Stepler is going to be doing some virtual stuff and some other things as well. It's going to be there. It's going to be vendors. There's going to be some cool hands-on stuff. It's going to be different than anything you've ever been to. I know. Yeah, Yuri. The California is such a crazy state. In so many ways, it's impossible to keep track. It just seems like they want to. California is supposed to be the state of fun. You would think, all the beaches and everything. And California is anti-fun. They're anti everything. Uh, you know, Pretty much anything, and a piece of sequoia would have to have a label that said almost this product is known to cause cancer in California. It's stupid. Now, California is a beautiful state, and I think it should be the most profitable state in our country. But unfortunately, it's being run incorrectly, and a lot of people from California are coming out here to Tennessee because of it, and several of you all's businesses. We've had several businesses come to Tennessee from California because we're more business friendly. It's a shame. All right, so I'll get off the whole California kick. Uh, I'm just saying it, Ian. Canadians are supposed to be these really friendly, huggable, loving people, and Bob Benny, I think, is if I had a choice between giving you a hug or Bob, I would totally want a hug from Bob. You're just so calloused. It must be that cold weather. I'll stop. Hey, Ian, we're totally going to do that. I think that's a great idea. Um, I think that would be awesome. Let's see. John Hatch, did you ever think you would be a rock star in the bee world? I don't really consider myself that. I consider myself a share of experiences that I've gone through and stuff, and maybe just someone that can help people speed up their beekeeping process by basically showing where I've done poorly and what I've learned. Definitely not perfect. So not a rock star, but I definitely never anticipated this for sure. I never had any desire. I wasn't even hardly on YouTube at all prior to Laurel strong arming me into doing these videos. And I told her for months after we started that this was a poor idea. I didn't really think it was good. It was very embarrassing early on, especially. And sometimes it's still pretty embarrassing, but usually that's what I do to myself. But when you have 70 subs, 300 subs, 200, and people will really rip into you, and my videos have gotten better. I've gotten more comfortable. I still have a lot of improvements to make, but yeah, I never anticipated this to happen. It's been a huge blessing to me, because I've learned so much. I've met a lot of people through this, and that I've learned I've learned so much from this. I'm not just the one sharing information. I am also gaining experiences from other people around the world. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, Ron, I totally agree with you on that. Have you ever caught a fall or winter swarm in a trap? And yes, I have. And I did that video back in early September, I believe it was, on that swarm that landed in the middle of my yard and went to that hive, and it started making brood and taking off. And then all of a sudden, they either killed the queen or the queen left, and there's just the bees and just a tiny bit of brood. And it's late September. Fall swarms do that to me a lot. That's why fall swarms are just a lot of times they're excuse me, more trouble than they're worth, in my opinion. Not That's not always the case. I caught one in August in a swarm trap one time that was about 3 frames strong. I went ahead and threw a sugar brick on it and fed them a lot, and they had a good queen. And they actually produced about 60 pounds of honey, I believe, the next year. But it took a while to build them up, and I also had drawn comb for them. And I requeened it at some point as well. So I think if you have the time, then see what you can do. There's always something to learn from those type of experiences. It's not always necessarily a positive time investment as far as monetarily or honey wise, but still, I think those are important experiences. Let's see here. So Todd P's asking, did you banish the cats to California? Haven't seen them for a long time. Um, no, No, if I sent them somewhere, I would probably send them up to New York or somewhere like that. All those cool cats up there. But seriously, we have so many coyotes up here. We hear them yipping constantly. Oh, you want this? Okay. And I mean, we just have so many coyotes here and things. Something killed them. And both times, I'm pretty sure it was either a coyote or a neighbor's dog. That's very common. Cats don't do very well around here. I don't know how many cats I've seen die around here because they don't do well unless you keep them indoors. And I will never have a pet in my house. I cannot stand the hair and the dander and all that stuff. I'm very sensitive to those kind of things, and that's why Laurel's like, that's why we have lizards. All right, let's see. Don't clear your throat. Learn from Ian. I missed something there. Okay, so let's see. Warren, very excited for spring. Made a bunch of nuke boxes. All right, someone's already making some equipment. Yeah, I am trying to help people not make help folks not to make the mistakes that I've made. But sometimes you just got to do it yourself, and maybe we can help eliminate one or two. So, spirulina, have you reached a conclusion on spirulina, or is it still too early to assess? Sorry. So, it's too early to assess, and ultimately, I think we're going to be able to get a decent picture coming out of winter. That's when I find pollen patties the most useful. When those bees need to build up, and I've got some patties I'm going to be using to feed to good, strong colonies that are coming out of winter, and seeing how they build up off of them. I'm skeptical on the strong smell and how the bees handle that. I'm a bit concerned how the thymol and stuff will affect the cluster and the pheromones. So I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking right now. Uh, I can't. It's just one of those things that we tested. It obviously doesn't kill your bees, so I don't know. I don't have a good, clear opinion on that product. Yeah, coyotes are all over the place here. I haven't had a chance to even deer hunt this year. Bees is everything right now. I mean, Laurel's sitting on a huge stack of letters to get back with people on. It's just go, go, go. We mainly did this live chat to talk about the conference in January. And again, like I said before, we'll be talking about 2022's conference, which is going to be even bigger and better. I'm excited about all of even the people who are not coming, how many people are interested. This is going to be great because it's just going to make it to where we can get, some better speakers. Not that Ian's bad or anything. I know we're going to have him because he's great, but also some other speakers that are really good, and people that aren't necessarily on YouTube. There's several people out there that nobody knows of that are very good year in and year out with their bees and are making a living or very close to it. And they've got a lot of neat tricks, but just nobody knows their name. So we're going to try to bring some of those people out to the forefront and learn some ourselves, and also bring some products out to the forefront. I'm excited about some of the vendors we have this year. I will say one thing that talking about trying to help people reach the next step. Ian's all about that too, and Bob's a very giving person of his time as well. Especially about 8 or so years ago, 10 years ago, I knew a lot about beekeeping, but I wasn't monitoring my mites well enough. And I would just have great colonies in spring, and they would do pretty good to about early July, and they start going downhill, and they just stayed on a downhill, um, just constant downhill the whole way down. And by the time it got to the early part of September, I was losing hives, or they were so weakened. We just produced so many mites here in Tennessee, and not all bees are created equal, but still, just not realizing how damaging the mites and the viruses are. That's just rule number one. You've got to Something has to control those things. If you have super bees, congratulations. Send some to me, please, and because I would like to try them out. However, um, something, whether it's the bees or some magic unicorn horn powder or your mite treatment, something's got to control those things, because they're the ones that are making you have weak clusters going into winter, typically, and they are the ones that are causing your bees to abscond. And you might have just a handful of bees left in your hive come October and September. And that happened to me for several years. And I was following all the wrong information, back, a decade or so ago. And even when I got off the whole treatment free dealio and started getting into treating, there wasn't a whole lot of good information that I was connecting with that was showing me the timing behind it or what products worked. And then you try formic acid at the wrong time of the year, or even the right time when the temperature thresholds are right, and you still end up causing brood loss. And it's just constant learning curves, super frustrating. But we're hoping to eliminate some of that for you all. Yeah, Ian's like, I'm terrible at presenting. It'll be a long presentation. I've heard a lot of terrible presenters, and some of them are pretty well known, and they do pretty well financially. And they really stink. And you're not you're a whole lot better than those guys. You know, um, I I would say this, Ian. I wouldn't have you down if you were really bad at speaking. I'm very nitpicky about that, extremely. And we're definitely not doing it because you're Canadian, because we Americans just don't care. We're not like you guys. Cayman, where do you buy your unicorn horn powder? There's some hippies over towards Nashville, and I I got something that looked kind of like a piece of a dread in there, but I don't know if that's just part of the unicorn horn powder special or not. So I just left it in there. Stank a little bit. Okay, I'm sorry. Laurel's like, stop it, please stop it. Can you tell why the bee is not taking plastic foundation? Well, two reasons that I can think of right off the bat. One, the bees aren't ready to draw any foundation out. And even with wax foundation, they'll chew holes in it and ruin that wax foundation if they're not interested. They don't view foundation as theirs, they just see it as kind of space up there. And if they're bored and have nothing better to do, they'll chew holes through the wax foundation, and they'll chip off the wax off of your plastic foundation. So you got to make sure that they are strong, they're growing, and there is a incoming sugar source that is going to allow them to be able to make wax scales and then start building wax. So timing is important. They've got to want to draw, or it doesn't matter how good your foundation is. And so they've got to want to draw, and you also have to have a decent wax coating on that plastic. It can just be a little thin layer, honestly. As long as it's coated in wax, that's good. But once they start chipping off that wax foundation, you will need to apply more on there. I've got probably 100 frames that over the last couple of years that they've drawn really perfect on one side, and they've only drawn like half on the other side. And I keep sticking them to the side. And in the winter months, I'll go back and roll a little bit of our beeswax on the bare spaces and stick them back on a honey production colony, and they'll draw it out the rest of the way, no problem. Or stick it down at the edge of the brood nest on frame like a 9 or 10, or one of those frames. Let's see here. What is the price of a conference ticket? So it is $155. That is the price of this conference. And yeah, for both days, we have discounts on hotels. There, we are catering 2 meals that are fantastic meals for lunch. That's included in that price. There's also going to be some really sweet deals, no pun intended, on products there. There's going to be really inexpensive syrup. It's like bulk prices, but in small quantities. So you can get a 5 gallon bucket with a new bucket, brand new bucket, for $20, 5 gallons of cane sucrose syrup. And it's basically what Ian's using. It's like 67% solids. I think it's almost the exact same thing. And if you bought something similar like Pro Sweet in a 5 gallon bucket, even if you picked it up, you're talking 3 times the price. If you're talking about shipping that to your house, a whole lot more. So we're going to try to have several deals for you there as well when it comes to syrup and pollen sub. Also, the vendors will have some deals, and I'm going to have some boxes there available that are going to be, I think, a really a good price. It's just going to be several things there. Plus, the speakers are going to be amazing. Isn't that right, Laurel? Yeah, most of them. That's what I thought I'd get. If there's any hippies in the crowd, I apologize for earlier, but we got to make fun of somebody. It's a national pick on hippie days. And well, I've been picking on Canadians too, but that kind of feels like a daily thing. And any Canadians on here, this is just a personal thing between me and Ian. I'm short, so I've got to pick on tall people. It's just kind of how things work. Hey, Mike Barry, I appreciate that. I really think that with what we're offering and everything, it's going to be worth every penny. Um, I'm going to be the worst person speaking there. And what I'm going to be presenting is not the typical stuff that I have on my YouTube videos. I'm going to be digging deep and bringing out some of the big guns for this. But a lot of this kind of thing, it's really hard to fit a great message into one video unless it's super long. And so most of my videos, like yesterday's was 3 minutes, and I got some 10-minute videos, and I'm primarily focused on great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition, but into a more broad spectrum. Definitely want to hear from Bob Benny about business sides of things. And Bob's really, again, personable. He's very open about talking about how it was for him starting out when he was, in his late 20s or whatever it was. And it's going to be wonderful to hear those experiences from him. Kent Williams has got a lot of experience. Ian has done a few things. Um, he's still figuring things up there in Canada. Canadians love being picked on. Its attention. Well, I mean, you got such a long winter. Um, you know, Desperate times, man. You got to do something to keep it interesting. Yeah, Mike Berry does have a YouTube channel. I actually watched one of his videos the other day. I want to check that out. Yeah, and again, Ian, as long as nothing crazy happens, we're totally having you down in 2022. Tennesseans know how to have a good time. We know how to eat good food. We're gonna have a blast. So just plan on that. It's National Nerd Day. It's Pick on National Nerd Day. It's funny because both of my brothers and my dad are computer people. Hayden's in the Air Force, but he's working on more technical stuff these days. Does a lot of helicopter stuff as well. Could have used that syrup in October, Dan Schneider said. Yeah, yeah. Well, we did have some totes available back a month or so ago, but those totes are it's a great price really for what it is, but you just have to buy a lot at a time. Yeah, JD Stevens just noticed the flag. Yes. What? You know you like those muscles. Is Laurel speaking? Oh. Oh, I would pay 155. I would pay $1,550 to hear Laurel speak for an hour. Oh man. She would do great. I've waited 10 years so far for this. It's not gonna happen. Oh, that would be great. So, hey, Cayman, the 5-gallon bucket at the conference, how long do you think that syrup will last? Well, it is very stable. Now, over time, it can crystallize a little bit, kind of like honey does over time. That can be warmed up. So, I mean, it can last for years. The problem with that is syrup, just like honey, degrades over time, except it degrades faster than honey. I would try to use that within the year. Here in the Missouri and Tennessee and places like that, we don't really have the winter issues that people far up north do. But fresh is better. So this stuff is in really good shape. It's what I'm using. Same age. So, definitely I know beekeepers who get big deals on syrup and stuff, and they'll sock away 8 years worth of syrup and they'll just keep using it and using it. And I just think, "Oh my goodness." Even honey sitting in a hive after years and years, it gets pretty dark and nasty. Uh-oh, Tennessee better score some touchdowns. You know, Avalanche Mousy. I don't know exactly what we're gonna do about uploading the YouTube content. I'm thinking maybe like a sample or so because um, I don't think it's necessarily fair to those who were coming to freely broadcast it to everybody when they could have just stayed home and done the same thing. Um, I'm looking into different options there, and I'm actually talking to a guy who knows a lot about that kind of stuff and seeing what we can do. We're going to do our best to record it and make it available, but there probably will be a small fee involved, partially because the guy that'll be doing the recording is going to charge me stuff. Hey, hey, aloha came in from the big island of Hawaii. Woohoo! I love the big island. All right. Man, those little bananas y'all have on the island. Oh my goodness. You ruined me on the normal, well, what we perceived as normal bananas here on continental US. Go Buckeyes. We're coming for you. Roll Tide. In your dreams, you could barely handle Indiana. What a little bitty school. They're a basketball school. Seriously, I'm looking forward to that game. Oh, look what Ian said. Oh, goodness. Is this appropriate? Laurel's presentation would be giggling behind the curtain. We listen to that for hours. We would. She's over here just giggling up a storm. And see, I was going to save this for when I got up at the conference to say this, but Laurel is perfect for me because I like, doing just not a whole lot of comedy, but just, breaking the ice a little bit. And Laurel, nobody else might think it's funny, but I know I'll get a giggle out of my wife because she either laughs at my jokes or she laughs at me. Either way, I get the reaction that I'm wanting, which is a laugh. So our marriage was made in heaven. There are people that are made to make people laugh, and there are people that are good at laughing at people. And that's what Laurel is. Yeah, well, Laurel's the type of person when she accidentally hurts you or somebody else, she also laughs at, that. It's like a reflex, you can't help it. I remember before we got married, she accidentally smashed my hand really good, and she giggled the whole time as she was apologizing. It was really kind of weird. Came on to work for WebEx, we can look into a large recorded session if you're interested. Hey, Yuri, yeah, that I wouldn't be opposed to that. Wouldn't be opposed to that at all. Let's see here. Yeah, those little bananas, man, I'm telling you, they're great. Building a place. Oh, and Kona. Oh my goodness. I don't know what it's going to be like next year, but we're talking about visiting some friends at the bit on the Big Island if flights are available. I might not even be able to fly in and out of Hawaii at that point, so I don't know. Let's see here. Let's see. South Florida guy. I really appreciate. Thanks, crazy people around the world. That is a great name, by the way. There are a lot of crazy people around the world. I consider myself one of them. Let's see. Yeah, again, let me say thank you to everyone who's donated on this. And also, I said this earlier, but I'm not sure if he was on. He still may not be on. But I want to say a big thank you to Randall Carter, who donated a hive's worth of donation to our experimental yard, which is a significant amount. We really appreciate him for doing that. He's from Alabama, so that makes him even more special. Those Alabama fans are great people, God's people, all that kind of stuff. Roll Tide. Appreciate that very much, Randall. And we will be showing you the fruits of that next year for sure. Hey, Don Bearden, what was the end score on Bama versus Kentucky? I know it's probably hard for Kentucky people to hear, but us Alabama people, let's hear the numbers. Did you ever feed marshmallows? Stick them under the hood in winter, maybe? No, no, I never fed marshmallows to bees. I haven't even ever used them as a plug for queen candy. I always just make the queen candy. Yeah, why would you feed a marshmallow? Oil type sunflowers are good nectar sources. So I need to look for some. I've never tried to grow oil type sunflowers before. Andre, how many of your jokes have left you with no supper for the night? No comment. No comment. No, Laurel's not that type. She's really not the type to hold a grudge. She's really sweet, but you know, she's too good for me. Let's see. On the Hilo side, okay, that's great. Yeah, my friends live over in the Waimea area on the Big Island and produce that Kiave honey. And I'm hoping that I can come up over there because it'd be nice to get away from our bees and go see your bees instead. Um, and actually, truly not do hardly anything with bees, very little, maybe spend a day with bees because we would like to get away from it for a while. Kentucky has a football team. Hey, their football team's been pretty good for a while. Let's see, marshmallows. Let's see. But anyway, so I'm gonna let's see. Do I need to have a deep or a medium for my box on the brood box? Well, Kenny, you can use a medium or you can use a deep for either one. Of course, if mediums, it takes about 2 mediums, not quite, it's a little bit bigger than a deep, 2 mediums, but 2 of them to equal a deep. So there are people that just use mediums for brood chambers. There are people who use mediums for everything. So it just really depends on what you wanna do. You definitely need to make sure that you leave plenty of stuff on there. Stan says 63 to 3. What was that? Was that the Alabama Kentucky game? Surely not. Cayman, do you like buckwheat honey? I had some and it was very different but good. I've never tried pure buckwheat honey. I've heard that it's kind of earthy and it's kind of one of those things where you love it or you hate it. We've planted some for our bees over the years, but I've never made a significant amount. It's mainly just something to go into addition with the fall flowers. Yeah, Waimea. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. For sure. Yeah, Yuri, I kind of tend to agree that it's better to keep it uniform. But there's a lot of commercial beekeepers out there that like running story and a halves is what they call them into the almonds, and um, you know, to each his own. I think it makes more sense for them because they're more geared towards commercial pollination as opposed to honey production and other things. But then just there's so many different ways. Yeah, Bama 63-3. Holy smokes. They took them to the woodshed. Hey, JP the B man, Saint Germain. All right. Saint Germain, Frederick Dunn had a big recommendation for you and your channel and told people about the upcoming conference on his channel. Frederick Dunn is a really nice fellow. I've chatted with him a few times. I tell you, I've said this before. I'll say it again. He's like the Bob Ross of beekeeping YouTube. Just happy little bees over here. Really calm and chill. I'll tell you though, on Facebook Messenger, he's that the whole army or marine side. Oops, excuse me. Um, or whatever it was, whatever branch of the military, came out a little bit, and I wasn't expecting it, tell you. But he's a really nice guy. We were hoping that he might be able to come um, to this one, but it's just not going to work out. But possibly 2022, Frederick Dunn will be there as well, and that would be a lot of fun to meet him. Hey, Cayman, how far do you do OAV treatments during the winter when you want to do more than one treatment during the minimum broodless period? So that's a great question. I like to do it a week apart and try to get it completely broodless if possible, and just get do two. I it's so fast, it's worth it. Varroa mites are your number one problem. It's the perfect time to do it. Do it a week apart. Just kill them. Let's see. I miss most of these live chats because of work, but I like to contribute a little every time for either the experimental yard or Laurel's new reptile. Oh, thanks, Ron. Um, Laurel, can we put this one towards the experimental yard? Nope. Doggone it. Ron, you, she's like, I've got reptile needs. No, she does. They could use a thing or two. She's got a pothos going in there, but she's trying to work on it a little bit. So it's great. And I really appreciate that, Ron. Yeah, make it a little bit more bioactive in there, a little bit more sustainable. Okay, let's see here. Do you have any bushes that you'd like to plant that make good nectar? Any that are deer resistant? I'm in Illinois. Okay, so here's something that I've got. Laurel, can you hand me that bag up there? What? Oh, Laurel does not want an iguana. That's and thank you, crazy person, but we don't want any more lizards or reptiles here. Oh, all right. So, in regards to stuff to plant, which I don't know, someone will probably correct me. I think Vitex can go up close to Illinois. I don't know if they can. They're kind of like a crepe myrtle type looking plant, but they produce a lot of nectar and pollen during the summer months for long periods of time. I've got a ton of little seeds right here, like tens of thousands of them. I'm going to be experimenting with those. There are some other type of plants that'll work pretty good. Most of them are invasives, like things that I'm not supposed to talk about you planting, but a lot of the things that are really beneficial for honeybees are invasive, just like the honeybee is. And deer might even eat Vitex. I don't know, but I think I have heard some people say deer will eat Vitex. Man, I don't know really know what to tell you. I'm really not into planting stuff a whole lot. It's not that I don't want to. I love plants. I just don't have the time. Vitex, I think, would be a lot of great. Poplar trees are good. Tell Laurel to make her caramel recipe this week. Always great. That honey caramel is addictive. Laurel is typing out the recipe right now, so if you would like to see that. Oh, did you say that? Oh, you're giving it to somebody else. We have a whole video on it. It's not very good because 'cause I'm the one doing it. Laurel refused, so, the quality is, but, yeah, the Avodia tree or the BB tree is a good tree for that for sure. Oh, yeah. The honey caramel is really easy, and if you like it softer, you can cook it a little bit less long, or you can cook it a little bit longer and get it more, hard. I prefer it a little bit softer myself. It and the honey, it really brings out the floral flavors in the honey. If you get some high quality vanilla in there, and then you cut it with a little bit of pecans or even peanuts, walnuts, something that's going to be salty like that, and just a little bit of dark chocolate. If you want to get real fancy, oh my goodness, it is like it is addictive. Yeah, so I've heard it. Vitex are very challenging to germinate. Thankfully, I've got about 30,000 chances here, so hopefully I can get about 50 to 100 plants, I'm hoping. I've heard that it's really easy if you have established plants and you just kind of let them germinate on their own in the soil, but actually letting them do it like this is can be more difficult. So John Hatch is asking, "How are your chickens?" Well, there several of them are like the freezers got chicken in it, so they're not doing very well right now. They're kind of cold. But we actually have a video to upload. I've got several videos on the other channel, on the gardening channel that I haven't even uploaded because we've just been so busy with this conference. I was not planning on doing this thing, and kind of Laurel's like this. Let's do this, and my other friend who's been doing a lot of work for me has pushed it really hard, and so I think it's going to be a good thing though. Let's see. Hey, Brian Reese, man, dude, you're too generous. I appreciate it. I really do. We're gonna have to have a hive in the test yard called the Brian Reese Hive because you donate like every time. It's crazy. We appreciate you very much, though. Vegetable gelatin is good for bees. Is that right? I don't know. I know people use gelatin um, in a few different formulations, but whether it's actually beneficial nutritionally for bees, I've never seen any research on that, and no experience myself personally. Came about what date do you do your first oxalic acid vapor treatment? I'm actually releasing a video tomorrow that's showing some of the brood that we have in our hives. It's very minimal, a very little amount, but it's still some. The carny is about the size of my palm on each side of the frame, maybe a little bit bigger. So it's not a whole lot. We're getting close to that time. I would say ideally, I try to shoot for the second week of December. We want to get it right before the winter solstice. Our bees just don't want to shut down a lot, especially big, healthy colonies. So, um, what I like to do, let's say I have a bunch of big colonies. I want to go to the biggest colonies that I have because they're the ones that have the best chance of having brood and just kind of see what they're looking at. Just go in there and check a little bit. But honestly, usually it's about the first or second week of December. And that's why I do two treatments a week apart because sometimes there is a little brood in there. Keith Delaplane. I have one of his books. Actually, it was Laurel's. When we got married, I kind of got it into my beekeeping library. But I've never met Keith personally, but I've heard of him several times. I appreciate that. I think. Hopefully, Keith's a good guy. I think he is. I've heard good things about him. Nice flag. Oh yeah, it's grand old flag. How much would you charge if you were to upload a recording of the conference? I was thinking somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 30%, to be honest, which I think is pretty fair for the content that will be made available. Um, but we will see. It gets kind of, I really don't know what to do about that, honestly. And also, I'm going to be, making sure that we take care of, Bob Benny and Ian and Kent Williams and any of our other speakers. And, they are going to be beekeeping is one of those industries. I feel like our professionals are underpaid a lot of times. It just blows my mind when the more that I've been asked to speak places, how not everybody's like this. Some people are very fair and generous. I don't expect to get overpaid, but what bothers me is when somebody approaches me and expects to spend multiple days of my time for no money. I've had people do that, and I'm not as busy as Bob is. I'm pretty busy, but I don't have as much, I guess, bees. Maybe I am as busy as Bob, just not as productive, probably, for sure. So I don't have that kind of spare time, and it's kind of interesting to me though how many places they expect you to come and just speak for a couple of days because you're passionate, and I'm desperate to find time for my family right now. Could you put the recipe below? I have searched your old videos for it and failed. Russell, I'll try to get Laurel on top of that here in a second. The kids needed something and she is out of the room. Yeah. And by the way, if you follow me on Facebook, we can also post it there. The caramel recipe is just out of this world. Yeah. Crazy people around the world. Strongest Hive is the best treatment for everything. But as far as beetle traps go, oh goodness. I would have to say the Dynamax towels. The beetle blasters do okay. I've never seen a trap that just was really good at eliminating everything. There's some of these new entrance reducer type things, and the beetle buster works pretty well. But the problem is there's the price tag, and also if they do propolize the holes, then it's less efficient. And no matter what trap that I've used, no matter what they claim, there's always going to be beetles get into your hive. That's what they spend all day doing, just trying to get into your hive. And I see these people with these like PEX entrances that reduce your hive down to this little PEX entrance. That is a recipe for an abscond if I've ever seen one. Now, for a little 5 frame nuke or something, that might work. The problem is, though, even a 5 frame nuke will abscond on a really hot day if they can't get enough ventilation out. And it might not even be that hot of a day. They've got to be able to vent. Bees are extremely hot natured. I think, what is their body temperature, like 102 degrees? It's hotter than the brood needs to be, and that's important because they need to be able to keep that brood warm on those cold spring days or those just cold nights. And so ventilation is very important. The colony needs to be able to have it. And I kind of got off on a little tangent there, but for small hive beetles, it's just something that we're going to have to live with. I think having controls that reduce the numbers can help significantly, but there's no one thing I would say that just heads and shoulders above everything else at this point. Definitely room for innovation, folks, in that area. And then if any of you make a product that is actually very useful and helpful, I'll be the first to let the world know. I'm always looking for things that can better beekeepers' lives and bees' lives because they matter. Okay, Laurel's fixing to post the recipe. Let's see. With you switching box handles styles to get more commercial, what other areas would you say are things you could have done differently from the start? Oh goodness, what a question! This is one of the topics that I'm wanting to sit down, like have a round table and talk to Bob and Kent and everybody about, and just talk about what are things, big learning curves and stuff like that. And I'm really interested to hear Bob's answers and Kent's answers to that. For me, though, it would definitely be when I got into beekeeping, just kind of bucking the system. When you're young, you do that a lot. You're trying to reinvent the wheel a lot of times, and you need a focus. And I'm not just saying if you're youthful, but if you're new to something, we try to reinvent the wheel. Focus on a lot of these old beekeeping books are still my favorite. These ones from the 70s and the 50s and the 80s, and the 80s isn't that long ago, but they're older books. They're not the ones that have come out in 2000 something. There are some good books like that, but most of my favorite books are old and they're fundamental. You prime your boxes, you paint them good. I didn't do that. I did like 30 boxes with no paint. They rotted so fast, it's not even funny. I didn't focus on mite treatments because I knew better than all the professionals that were treating mites. And that was a disaster. It cost me thousands. When it comes to feeding, that was another one. Oh, bees don't really need that feed. If they're good bees, they don't need any feed. And there's so much play there. Every year is so different. Hives can be weak at the during the right moment to collect nectar, and they miss out. There's so many things. So just definitely s- stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Try to keep things uniform. I was bad about building this and building that, and oh, this is the new thing that's going to help me get to that next level. Screen bottom boards, oh yes, these are going to fix the varroa problem. They're going to be good for our bees. That ventilation, yeah, right. um it's not that I don't have a couple, but I've totally gone away from them. Spent a lot of time with those for several years, and now it's just a piece that I have a bunch of stuff like that sitting around, and it's just from a business standpoint was a very foolish idea. And that's not all bad. It's not like it's just it was all completely stupid. I learned so much from a lot of my mistakes. The problem is you lose years and you lose money. If you're okay with those two things, then that's fantastic. But if you're trying to run a business, it's a terrible way to do things. Thanks, Laura. Oh, she posted it. All right, great. But yeah, once I stopped reinventing the wheel and stopped ignoring the people who were doing things, it's hard sometimes because when you don't have any connections, it's hard to seek out the good information because a lot of times those guys are too busy managing their businesses. Or it's like kind of me, and I'm not on Bob Benny's level or Ian's, but I am constantly getting emails and letters and stuff. And if I was to open myself up to people just coming and mentoring people, oh my goodness, I couldn't keep up with it if there was 10 of me right now. And so I can understand why a lot of beekeepers don't do that. And not everybody is as social as I am. I enjoy that when I can. So it can be hard to source that information, and that's kind of what this YouTube channel is for, and that's why I'm really excited about Bob and why he and I are such good friends. Oh yeah, and thanks, Andy White, for your donation on PayPal. I heard you were in a deer stand earlier, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Hope we didn't jump off any big bucks or anything and mess anything up in the tree stand. Oh, and Cody Birdwell, thank you so much for donating to our experimental yard as well. We really appreciate that. And I would have a ton more information to talk about the experimental yard. I plan on actually already having that by now and having a chart and just all kinds of cool stuff. But this conference kind of hijacked that. It will be happening, and we'll have a lot of details on that in the future. But this conference is really eating up a lot of my time right now. John Hatch, I made the caramels and got a little in my forehead. My tongue beat my brains out just to get to. It is really good. And, people talk about, how heat damages honey, and it does to a degree. You do lose some things when you heat honey. Because I've had some people like, you should never heat your honey up. It's you're destroying all this stuff in your honey. But the alternative is sugar. And some people are like, well, you're basically rendering your honey into just basically the same thing as sugar. No, you're not. Is it as good as it was when it was in a raw state? I'm sure it's not. But when you use it and you make caramels out of sucrose sugar or you make it out of your honey, you can taste the difference. There are some extra goodies in there that are not in that sugar. And it gives you a lot of flavors. And a lot of caramels are made from corn syrup and high fructose and all kinds of different things. So, um, different. And people need to get back to cooking with honey more. Laurel makes some chocolate chip cookies with honey in it, and they're really good. Now, the chemistry um, between the difference between honey and sugar is quite different. So you end up with a fluffy cookie because honey is hygroscopic, not hydroscopic, hygroscopic, and it absorbs moisture, makes them nice and fluffy. let's see here. Hey, this guy right here. This guy here. Yeah, just so let's see. Is there a Facebook for Tennessee's Bees or this channel? Hey, Ron Fultz. Yes, there is. If you just look at my name, Kamon, and Reynolds on Facebook, you should be able to find me. I'm not a really huge fan of Facebook, and if it wasn't for bee related stuff, I wouldn't be on Facebook, to be honest. That's the only time I ever use it. Otherwise, it's mostly a big waste of time unless something from my mom appears, and then it's important. Um, if mom, if you're watching this, I love you very much. So I have a lot of information on there, stuff I can't post on here just because it's a different format. I can't post pictures very well on YouTube. And there's just little updates like I'll say, "Hey, Kent Williams is going to be one of our speakers," or "Hey, here's a new vendor that we're going to be having," or whatever. So that's it can be fun to be on that platform. Not as fun as this is. Yeah, Ted, and that's the whole goal. I mean, it's not the entire goal at the conference to let's everyone's gearing towards a beekeeping business because some people don't have that desire to turn this into a 50 colony or a 500 or 1,000 colony operation. But having guys like Bob Benny who run like 2,000 hives and have experience going to almonds and listening from guys like Ian and Kit Williams, who also goes to the almonds. And it's not just all about going to the almonds, it's also just about keeping your bees alive and selling nukes and making queens and ultimately keeping them alive. And if you can live off of your bees are pretty darn healthy. That's all I've got to say about that. So we're going to be we're focused on having ample time where you all are able to talk to these guys and be able to get the information that you need that you cannot get in bee books and get that personal time. I'm really anxious to listen to these beekeepers and hear their stories because they have so much experience. Yep, Dan, that's the only reason I'm on Facebook is for the bees. We do so much for the bees, stuff that we normally wouldn't do. Our poor wives, and if you're a wife on here, then your poor husband. Oh, how long? Oh, oh yeah. Oops. I said that's right. What can you do to keep new cutouts from swarming? Thanks. Okay, so this is a nice little topic. If you're talking about putting them in to your hive and then having them abscond on you, that's one thing. But if you're talking about them swarming later, I'll address both of those. First of all, if you're catching a lot of swarm traps and cutouts, there's a good chance that over time, especially if you're breeding from these, you can be selecting for bees that are more swarmy because you're catching them in swarms. It's not always the case for sure, but some bees are definitely have a greater swarm tendency, and it's really annoying. I had a colony swarm out this spring that had about 8 frames of deep comb for the queen to lay in and all kinds of room. They were pretty small and they still swarmed anyways. And I had colonies that were twice the size that didn't swarm at all. And that's some genetics I don't want around. So sometimes you can get some really swarmy bees selecting that way, whether you mean to or not. But then if you're talking about absconding after you collect the cutout, that's something different altogether. And if you'll notice in the video that I did back in, I think it was March, early March, when I did that rotten tree cutout, it was a very small cutout, and I only kept 1 frame of brood because there's only one really good frame of worker brood. I discarded the drone brood. I just discarded a lot of comb, and I got a lot of flack for it. I only saved one actual comb of the original stuff. Plus, it was a lot of work, and I have drawn combs. Lucky me, right? So I gave them combs. I shook in some bees from another hive, and I made sure they had good bee coverage. And I fed them, and I fed them, and I fed them, and with that boost and everything, they did really well. So I think a lot of times cutouts can it's very stressful on the bees whenever you cut them out. Now some people are a heck of a lot better at it than I am. And I can think of several YouTubers that are, but I think that's a lot of it. And definitely don't treat them or anything recently after you put them in. Yeah, feed them heavily. I mean, people can say what they want about cane sugar, being bad for bees, but everything that I've seen over the last 17 years is to the contrary. Hey, JD Stevens, where'd you get your HDO plywood? Out of curiosity. Okay, concrete form guys. Con contact concrete form guys. Cool. That stuff looks really good. How heavy is that stuff? Yeah, Fred's a really nice guy. He's got a good channel. I'm gonna meet him at some point, and it's gonna be fun. We'll do a video on that whenever he comes out here. Yeah, honey in my coffee tastes and my tea tastes a lot better than sugar does. You got some really nice spring honey, Don. So obviously that coffee's just made a lot better. Yeah. What do you like the outside temperature to be when you do your winter OA treatments? I like it to be in the upper 30s, low 40s. You can do it in the 50s for sure. They say a looser cluster is better, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But honestly, usually I'm doing it, I think, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, upper 30s, low 40s, somewhere around there. It seems like it when it typically is done. Again, it's very mild here compared to some states. So Bud Helsing or whatever took a beekeeping course, Ontario, Canada, and the place isn't using OA yet, and they suggest giving the bees drone comb, then feeding it to the chickens before they emerge. Any thoughts on this? All right. It's all about timing. And you'll have, if you're in Canada, it's very different timing up there. I mean, what you guys are doing in July is exciting from what I've gathered. You guys are in the middle of a flow. Here in July, things stink. There's nothing coming in hardly of any amount. And so why I'm saying that is because drones are only produced heavily when there's a lot of nutrition in the hive. So I see this works really good when you time it just right. And I still don't think it's good enough by itself personally. I think drone comb removal is beneficial, but at the same time, it only works as long as they're wanting to raise a lot of drones. And when I have the most mites is when my bees don't want to raise a lot of drones. By the time my spring flow's done, that's about middle of June. So, my mite levels are still rising to their highest peaks all the way into August and early September. And my bees will raise some drones during that time period, but they're not going to be super easy. And then I've got to go back and do that on a regular schedule, or I have now created a ton more mites than I had before. So it can work. It's a very intensive IPM, integrated pest management. I could see that working in conjunction with something else, like a treatment, maybe oxalic acid vapor, drone comb removal, do multiple things. I see that working. I don't see drone comb removal working good enough by itself in my area for sure. So, Haley Valo or whatever says temp doesn't matter with OA, and I don't know. I've heard it many different ways. If they're extremely tightly clustered, that's what I've heard is the issue is that it's hard for the oxalic acid vapor to get in amongst the bees and it's not as efficient. I don't know if that's true or not. However, I just err on the side of caution. Let's see. In my experience, Vitex germinates best when it's hot, like in late May and June. I have about 20 in my yard, and they're 13 years old and about 10 feet tall. I think they're beautiful looking plants. And by the way, Randall Carter, um, I don't know if you were on earlier, but I want to say thank you for your very generous donation to our experimental yard, and we really do appreciate you a lot, and are excited to present some good information on testing out insulation versus non, and also most importantly, testing mite treatments and their efficiency, which is my number one goal for next year. Is taking all these mite treatments that we have and trying to figure out how to best use them. And, are they something that we can use as a business to get away from apifar or minimize it? And can we use them in a way that's not going to be damaging our bees? Because some of them, they're a double-edged sword, and if you use them incorrectly, they can really hurt the colonies. Get some water in here. There we go. Mike Berry. It's heavy and hard to cut, but very durable. Discounted metric stuff. Yeah, not a whole lot of people use metric around here, do they? Yeah, yeah. Mites are an issue. Yeah, small hive beetles weren't as bad this year. So there's always going to be some things changing in beekeeping. That's Bob Benny and I were talking about this the other day on, when he first got into beekeeping, all the changes that have taken place since he first got into bees. And I would love to be able to go back in time and experience that, but it might just spoil me and just kind of sicken me to a degree because, Bob described it as it was easy. And that's what we all want is easy, right? So my thoughts are we have all these pests and problems. So in order to get back to having the healthy bees, it's no longer easy, but it can be done. We just got to put in that extra work to get to it. And that's what this channel is all about is putting that extra work. Yep, those double screen boards are nice. I've got about 100 of them. I'm not using all of them right now. I've got about 30 active ones. And I think they're really handy. I don't like a lot of extra equipment floating around but if I was going to take one piece of equipment that you don't use all the time and having it sitting around to use around, just lying around, it would be a double screen board because they're really handy. If you need a bottom board, they can work temporarily as a bottom board. You can use them as a double screen board. Um, they just I think they're a really handy tool, and you can make them pretty inexpensively. Yeah, Ricky. Thanks, Laurel, for the caramel video. But Cayman is right. The food always tastes better when your wife cooks it. Well, as long as your wife can cook. I have met some of my friends' wives, and let's just say I can cook better than they can. It's so. But yes, if your wife knows how to cook, it's always better. And Laurel is a really really good cook. If I didn't strive to keep in such good shape and have lucky genetics going for me, I'd be as fat as a tick the way Laurel cooks because it's just all that delicious Southern cooking. What temperature do you usually use Apgar to not hurt the bees? I really like to have it in the 80s. I'd like to have it even, low 80s if possible. You can use it warmer than that, but then you want to reduce it down. Instead of using the 250-gram dose, I've been known to use, I just kind of eyeball it and get about 30 grams instead, 25 thereabouts, and use it one week, use it the next, and use it the next week. And that has worked pretty well for me, but I always use two treatments in my busy season. So I use one in late June, and then I'll use something else in late August. So that's one of the reasons why I want to do this experimental yard because there's a lot of things that I've been done over the years that worked pretty well, and sometimes it worked very well for me, and sometimes did not work as good. And so I'm going to try to isolate the variables with this test yard, and we'll be monitoring temperature, all of these different things. So, if you guys have any suggestions, I'm always open to ideas, but I think we're pretty busy right now. What's the Canadian clone of the ProVap 110? I have the John O, but always looking for new toys. Hey, Brian, I am totally with you, man. They're made by a guy. I think his last name is spelled, it's either Biermann, Bierman, Bierman. I don't know how they pronounce that. I don't know exactly what he calls them, but they are on B Source and he sells them there. You can look in the for sale section. I believe they're pretty up towards the top. Now, B Source just totally changed the forum setup, and no, very few people like it. I think once people learn it, it'll be okay. But I hate learning new technological things. I really do. Well, formic acid work in winter. I've got some friends of mine who have been using it here in November because it's cool enough, and they say they're not having any ill problems because it's in the temperature threshold and it's good at cleaning the mites up. Formic acid scares the crap out of me, though. If it was easy, Girl Scouts would be doing the beekeeping. Well, that is true. Beekeeping's a good bit of work, but it's not. We don't. And I try to encourage people to realize that it's going to be a lot of work involved and a lot of learning curves involved. But I really think if you do your due diligence and you put that work in the right areas, it's totally worth it. It's darn profitable actually if you can make it work for you. It takes some time to get to that point. Just be patient, stick with it. If I had a dollar for every time I thought about giving up on beekeeping, I would have a lot of dollars, a whole lot of dollars. Let's see, formic. My brother tried formic in the fall and had a virgin queen in the spring. Funny how that worked. And I've heard so many horror stories with formic. I've had really bad experiences with formic, even using it in the temperature range. You hear about bad batches of it where the ratios gotten a little wrong, or it's been sitting around too long, and so it's not as potent as it needs to be. I don't know. That's again, we're going to be testing this kind of stuff in this test yard. So I'm excited to learn. I think there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to be surprised about. Some things maybe I think that work pretty good that are going to disappoint me. The alcohol washes are going to tell all. So we'll see. Well, everybody, I told Laurel this would be about an hour. She told me to keep it short. She's looked at me several times and like, it's been an hour. It's been an hour. So I got to get off of here. Plus, I'm losing my voice. I've been talking a lot today. Yeah, formic Jason is kind of a crapshoot for lack of a better term, I guess. Uh, right now, the best two options, the best combination that I'm aware of is Apivar and oxalic acid. And there's still some issues with Apivar, and there are issues with oxalic acid if the timing is not correct. Timing is just as important as the treatment itself. You treat too early before you really need it, and then the mites can rebound late in the season and still impact your cluster size. So, guys and gals, I need to get off of here. I'd like to say thank you to Paul, who sent a donation to our PayPal. We really appreciate you all. I'm looking forward to meeting several of you at the conference. And I've got a video coming out tomorrow that's showing the difference between carnies and Italian bees in our yard. We're almost 90% carny for the most part now, very little Italian. But it's showing you the size of some of our bees over here. And I've actually got to get off of here so I can edit that video and that kind of stuff. So we'll see you guys again soon. We'll have more updates on the conference and also updates on the 2022 conference. So I'm excited. Thanks everybody for being here, and we'll talk to you later.